When I came out of emergency surgery, my husband wasn't sitting beside my bed. There was an RBC fraud alert on my phone instead. $16,482 charged to my Visa by WestJet and a luxury resort in Banff, Alberta. When I called him, his voice was relaxed, almost cheerful. "Relax, Stella," he said. "You're in good hands there. We'll talk when we're back." Then the line went quiet. What happened over the next 7 days was something I was never supposed to find out, and a truth that changed everything once I did. I was still wearing a hospital gown when I read the alert. There was a blood pressure cuff on my arm and a plastic ID band on my wrist. I had gone into emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix 12 hours earlier. I hadn't booked a flight. I hadn't booked anything. My hands shook as I opened the banking app and scrolled the transactions. WestJet, 6 tickets, processed at 7:14 a.m. The Rimrock Resort Hotel deposit, cleared at 9:47 a.m. Spa packages, dining credits, a private gondola tour. The charges were itemized and time-stamped, each one sitting beneath the date I had been taken to the hospital on a stretcher. I called my husband a second time. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "What is this charge?" I asked. "Why is there over $16,000 missing from my account?" He exhaled slowly. "Stella, relax. You're in good hands there. We're already at the resort. The deposits were non-refundable. We've had this trip planned since February. Just focus on resting. You're in Banff. We'll talk properly when we're home, okay?" Before I could say another word, he ended the call. I lay still for a moment, then I opened Instagram. My sister-in-law had posted a reel 2 hours earlier. She was standing at the base of Sulphur Mountain with her husband, both of them grinning into the camera, the blue-gray peaks rising behind them. My brother-in-law was beside them with his girlfriend, holding a glass of something amber. My mother-in-law sat at a restaurant table covered with plates, laughing with a linen napkin pressed to her chest. And my husband stood slightly off-center in the group, sunglasses on, shoulders loose, looking completely at ease. The caption read, "Best family, ever." I scrolled without meaning to. The resort lobby, a gondola at sunrise, someone photographing a spa receipt like a trophy, shopping bags from a boutique on Banff Avenue spread across a king-size bed, 6 people, 48 hours of smiling, and every single dollar beneath those photographs had come from my account. I put the phone face down on the tray and stared at the ceiling until a nurse came to check my vitals. She noticed my expression and asked gently if something was wrong. I told her I was fine. That was the first of many lies I would tell to get through that week. Once she left, I called my sister-in-law. She answered while music played in the background, something with a heavy beat. "Hey," she said, "how did surgery go?" "Did you know everything was charged to my card?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "The deposits were going to expire. Your husband made the call." "Honestly, Stella, this trip has been on the calendar since February. I'm not going to apologize for something that was already planned. I was in surgery when those charges went through. And you came out of it. You're okay." A pause, someone laughing nearby. "We'll bring you something back." She hung up before I could respond. I called my brother-in-law next. He picked up quickly, which surprised me. "You all right?" "No," I said. "I'm lying in a hospital bed and there are $16,000 in charges on my credit card that I did not authorize." He made a short sound, not quite a laugh, but close enough. "Come on, he handles your shared finances all the time. It's not money you'll never see again. The resort is gorgeous, by the way. You would have loved it." I would have loved to be conscious when someone decided to spend it. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "Enjoy the quiet," and then he was gone. I worked through the rest of the list. My mother-in-law told me I was making things difficult. A cousin said she hadn't realized the card wasn't pre-approved and then stopped us answering entirely. Another relative texted a single line, "We'll sort it when everyone's home." Not one person asked how the surgery had gone. Not one person asked whether I was in pain. The people who were supposed to be my family had considered where I was, had known exactly what was happening, and had chosen to leave anyway. By the time the last call ended, I understood that clearly. This wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't even selfishness dressed up as an accident. It was a decision. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Every morning began the same way. Vital checks, medication rounds, a careful shuffle to the bathroom and back. The ward was busy and the nurses were kind in the specific, practiced way that hospital nurses learn to be: efficient, present, never overstepping. But they noticed things. One of them, a tall woman named Bev, who worked the day shift, started making small talk during my morning checks. On the third day, she brought me a crossword book from the nurse's station and said she had a spare. On the fourth day, she sat with me on her lunch break because she had noticed I hadn't touched my food. "Do you have family coming?" she asked. "They're out of town," I said. It was the truest version of the lie I could manage. She nodded and didn't press. The kindness of strangers, I was learning, fills the space that people who should know better choose to leave empty. My phone kept lighting up, and every time it buzzed I thought maybe this one was different. Maybe he had looked at what he'd done and felt something. Instead, my notifications were a steady scroll of vacation content. My mother-in-law posted the resort hot tub at sunset, steam rising against the Rockies. My sister-in-law uploaded a gondola reel, 14 seconds of mountain air and laughter, and someone saying this is the life. My brother-in-law tagged the restaurant and left a 5-star review. "Best elk tenderloin I've ever had, worth every penny." I knew whose pennies he meant. My husband texted me twice the entire week, once to ask if the Rogers bill was set to auto-pay, because he couldn't find the login. Once to let me know he had called the hospital's main line, and they had confirmed I was stable, as though checking in with reception was a substitute for sitting in the chair beside my bed. I stared at both messages for a long time, before putting the phone in the drawer. That hurt in a specific, quiet way I didn't have a name for yet. Not rage, something smaller and colder, the recognition that I had become, in the minds of these people, a background detail, a bill to glance at, a stable patient, an inconvenience that had been managed and set aside. Each evening the ward quieted, and the family visits in other rooms grew louder. I could hear conversations through the walls, a daughter reading to her father, a husband translating the doctor's words for his mother. My room stayed silent except for the monitors. I stopped watching the door. By Thursday I knew no one was coming. On the 6th day they came back. The door opened just after 2 in the afternoon, and for one fraction of a second my chest lifted. I thought perhaps the week had given him time to think. My husband walked in wearing a gray zip-up from the Rimrock gift shop. His face was slightly reddened from mountain sun. He was smiling. "Hey," he said, "you're looking better." He set a paper bag on the bedside table and leaned over to kiss my cheek. I didn't move toward him or away. "We got you something." He reached into the bag and pulled out a small box of chocolate-covered almonds with a Parks Canada logo on the lid, and a fridge magnet, shaped like a bear in a Mountie hat. I looked at the 2 items sitting on the tray beside my hospital lunch. "You bought those with my credit card," I said. He blinked. "I used the joint account for most of." "I've checked every transaction," I said quietly. "All of it came from my personal Visa and the joint RBC account, which you drew down by 40% in under 4 hours. He put his hands in his pockets. "Stella, you were already in surgery. The deposits were non-refundable. What were we supposed to do?" "Stay," I said. "You were supposed to stay." Before he could answer, the door swung open. My sister-in-law came in first, carrying a balloon bouquet she had clearly grabbed from the gift shop downstairs. One read "Get Well" in cheerful yellow letters. My brother-in-law followed with a box of Timbits and 2 coffees. "Look who's up and alive," my sister-in-law announced. They filled the chairs and spread across the room, opening the Tim Hortons bag, talking over each other about the drive back on the Trans-Canada, fog near Lake Louise, a wrong turn that added 40 minutes. Nobody acknowledged that they were describing a vacation funded by the person lying in the hospital bed in front of them. My brother-in-law held up his phone and showed me a short video of someone on a white water rafting excursion, a charge I had already seen on my Visa for $340 per person. "You would have been terrible at this," he said, grinning. "Too scared." He wasn't wrong, but I had not been given the choice to find out. I watched them laugh together in my hospital room and felt something settle in my chest. Not a break, but a locking into place. I stopped expecting an apology. I stopped hoping any of them would look at me and understand. Whatever came next, I was going to do it quietly, and alone. After they left that evening, I opened my laptop for the first time all week. I started with the RBC app. I downloaded every statement from the past 60 days and sorted the transactions by date and timestamp. The first charge on my personal Visa, for $200 for WestJet tickets, had processed at 7:14 a.m. My OR intake form, which I would confirm the following morning, showed that my surgery began at 7:18 a.m. The resort hotel deposit cleared at 9:47 a.m. during the procedure itself. The anesthesia records would later confirm I was fully unconscious from 7:15 a.m. until 10:33 a.m. I exported every statement and emailed copies to myself, then printed the full record from the hospital's visitor business center down the hall. I requested my medical records through the hospital's patient services office the next morning. They were ready in 48 hours. Start time, anesthesia administration log, recovery transfer notes. The timestamps were exact. I had been completely unconscious when every significant charge had cleared. I went through my phone next. Screenshots of every text husband had sent that week, every social media post, resort photos, restaurant reviews, the gondola reel, saved with dates and timestamps, visible. A folder I labeled for no particular reason, February. Then I remembered the cameras. We have a Ring doorbell camera above the front entrance, and a second one covering the side entry to the garage. I pulled up the footage and scrolled back to the morning the ambulance had come. I watched the paramedics bring me out on the stretcher. My husband walked alongside them, carrying my overnight bag, looking pale and focused. The ambulance doors closed at 6:58 a.m. He came back inside at 7:09 a.m. The interior camera, positioned to cover the entryway and the kitchen island, picked up the rest. He walked directly to where my purse sat on the counter, unzipped it, took out my wallet, removed my personal visa and the secondary card I keep behind it, slipped both into his jacket pocket. Then he checked his watch, picked up his own bag from beside the door and left. I watched it 3 times. I saved the footage to 2 separate cloud folders and emailed the links to myself. He had not used my card by accident. He had planned to. He had gone back into the house specifically to take them. I closed the laptop, sat in this dark for a while, listening to the sounds of the ward. Then I slept better than I had in a week. I was discharged on a Friday afternoon. My husband picked me up. He was pleasant and quiet on the drive home, the kind of pleasant that wanted to be mistaken for remorse. He carried my bag inside. He asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. While he filled the kettle, I went upstairs and transferred my personal savings into an account that bore only my name. On Monday morning, I was at my branch when it opened. The fraud specialist at RBC reviewed everything methodically: bank statements, medical records, the OR schedule, the camera footage. She aligned the transaction timestamps with the surgical record and went very still. "Were these purchases authorized by you?" she asked. "I was under general anesthesia when they processed," I said. She excused herself for several minutes. When she came back, she told me the matter was being escalated to the bank's fraud investigation unit and that a temporary hold would be placed on the joint account pending review. She also recommended I speak with a lawyer before making any further joint financial decisions. I had already booked an appointment for Wednesday. The family lawyer I met with had a small office near Yonge and Eglinton, legal texts stacked on every flat surface, a habit of taking handwritten notes. She reviewed my file for nearly an hour without saying much, then looked up and asked whether my husband knew I had pulled this documentation together. "No," I said. "Good, keep it that way. Don't freeze anything he hasn't already noticed, just watch." She explained what the camera footage established, what the fraud unit's findings could mean for family court proceedings under Ontario law, and what my options were from here. She was precise and unhurried, and I left her office feeling, for the first time in 2 weeks, like someone was actually in my corner. 3 days later, I met with the fraud investigators at a downtown RBC office. They asked detailed questions about our shared accounts, our history, who had access to what. Then one of them asked whether I had home security footage. I handed over the cloud link. She watched the clip twice, paused it on the frame where my husband's slid my cards into his jacket, and made a note. "This is very helpful," she said, in the even tone of someone who had just confirmed exactly what they already suspected. "They told me not to alert my husband to the investigation. I told them I had no intention of doing so." I went home each night and acted like nothing had changed. My husband made dinner twice that week. He refilled my water glass without being asked. He told his sister over the phone that I was doing better and seemed more like myself. He believed the quiet meant acceptance. The quiet meant I had stopped arguing with people who did not intend to hear me. The call I had been waiting for came on a Thursday morning, just as I was leaving for a surgeon follow-up. "We're ready to proceed," the investigator said. "We have everything we need if you'd like to move forward." "Yes," I said, "please." By noon I had signed the fraud declaration forms listing every unauthorized transaction, The WestJet flights, the resort deposits, the spa packages, the meals, the excursions, the boutique purchases, the Parks Canada fridge magnet, nothing omitted. The joint account was formally flagged. My personal visa was cancelled and reissued under my name alone. The case was shared with the resort's financial compliance department, since the original booking had been made with disputed funds. My husband's debit card declined at a Petro-Canada station at 2:17 p.m. He called me 11 seconds later. What happened to the account? His voice was sharp. My card just got declined, in front of everyone. There's a fraud investigation open, I said. You'll need to call RBC directly. A fraud? Did you do this? I reported unauthorized charges. You froze our joint account over a trip? I reported charges I didn't authorize while I was under anesthesia. The bank froze it, not me. He went quiet for 3 seconds. We can't even buy groceries, he said. You should call the bank, I said again. Then I ended the call. My sister-in-law phoned 14 minutes later, her voice at a pitch I had never heard from her before. Someone from the resort's fraud team had contacted her. They were asking who had confirmed the group booking and whether payment authorization had been obtained from the cardholder. What do I tell them? She demanded. Tell them the truth, I said. That's not helpful, Stella. I know, I said, and I hung up. The family WhatsApp group, a thread I had been muted in for nearly a year, erupted within the hour. I turned my notifications back on and watched. My sister-in-law, someone please call Stella and fix this. The resort is asking for documentation. My brother-in-law, I thought he had permission. He said it was a shared account. My husband, can everyone stop texting and just wait? A cousin, why is the RBC fraud line calling me about a charge I didn't even make? My sister-in-law again, he told us it was cleared. He specifically said she knew about the trip. My husband, I said stop. My mother-in-law, I don't understand what's happening. Someone call me. Nobody called her. They kept typing over each other instead, demands turning to accusations, certainty turning to backpedaling, the same people who had posed together on a mountain terrace now asking each other in writing who exactly had authorized what, and who had told whom it was fine. I read every message without replying to a single one. My husband came home that evening and rattled the front door. He found me at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and the calm that comes from having already made every important decision. Do you understand what you've done? He said. I can't access our shared money. I'm getting calls from the bank and the resort. My brother is furious. My mother is upset. My sister thinks I lied to her. Did you? I asked. He stopped. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Because my lawyer received the investigation notes this afternoon. I said, there's a WhatsApp message from the morning of my surgery. You texted your sister at 6:43 a.m. You told her I had already gone to the hospital and that she should head to the airport. She replied asking if I knew about the trip. I looked at him steadily. You told her I would understand once I recovered, that it was fine. His face changed in a way I had not seen before. She never knew it wasn't fine, I said. Not because she couldn't have guessed, but because you told her not to worry. That's not a miscommunication. That is a decision. And the camera above our front door recorded you walking back into the house after the ambulance left, going to my purse, and taking my credit cards out of my wallet before you drove to the airport. He sat down heavily at the table across from me. He started to say something about deposits, about planning, about how I would have wanted them to go rather than lose the money. I let him finish. Then I told him the camera footage had already been submitted to the fraud investigators, and that he should probably contact a lawyer of his own before our next conversation. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was different, smaller. Is this really what you want? You left, I said, while I was in surgery. You went back into the house, took my cards out of my wallet, and you left. There was nothing left to argue with after that. The proceedings took several months, the way these things do. My lawyer was patient, and the evidence was not complicated. RBC restored every disputed charge and closed our joint accounts. My personal visa was reimbursed in full through the fraud claim. Several family members were contacted individually regarding their portions of the resort booking. My brother-in-law, his girlfriend, and 2 cousins were each required to repay their share of the accommodations and excursions to the fraud recovery fund. My mother-in-law was not held financially liable. The investigation found she had not been aware of the circumstances and had no access to the accounts. In the divorce proceedings, the judge reviewed the full file, the camera footage, the bank records, the surgical timeline, the message chain. He noted that taking my financial instruments while I was unable to consent, and deliberately concealing that decision from the other family members to prevent them from questioning it, represented a serious breach of marital trust and of fiduciary responsibility under Ontario family law. He said it plainly and without editorializing, and I sat in that room and heard every word of it. For months, my husband had framed what he'd done as a misunderstanding I was choosing to weaponize. His family had taken his version and built a story around it, that I was difficult, that I was punishing everyone over a mistake made under stress. Hearing a judge read the same evidence I had assembled alone in a hospital room, and arrive at the same conclusion, lifted something I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I moved into a rental apartment in the east end of the city that spring. It was smaller than our house, and I filled it slowly with things that were entirely mine. I kept the crossword book Bev the nurse had given me. I still haven't finished it. My parents had driven down from Sudbury the moment I called them. The call I made on day 3, after I'd finally stopped pretending I was fine. My father assembled the IKEA shelving unit in my bedroom and complained about the instructions for 40 minutes. While my mother made coffee and talked to me about nothing important, which was exactly what I needed. There are moments now when I think about the morning I woke up in that recovery room. The ceiling tiles, the buzzing phone, the strange foggy quiet of the anesthesias wearing off before I understood what I was waking up into. At the time it felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Now I think the fraud alert was the first honest piece of information I had received in years. Before it, I had a marriage and a family and a life that looked, from the outside, like the thing you were supposed to want. After it, I had the truth about who those people were, and the evidence to stop making excuses for them. My appendix nearly killed me. The surgery that saved me happened while the people I trusted most were boarding a flight to a mountain I have never seen. The hospital fixed what was broken in my body. What came after fixed something else, the part of me that had learned, slowly and without noticing, to call betrayal by a gentler name. I don't call it anything gently anymore. I know what it was, and I know now what I am worth protecting.